Okay, let's get started. This is the 61st Security Thought Leadership webinar. We've been here every Tuesday and Thursday throughout the pandemic period. And indeed, we're going to stay on Tuesdays and Thursdays all the way up to Christmas. Sometimes we do other days as well. And the topic today is one that has emerged from previous webinars. And it's an important one because the idea of thought leadership is we critique today the type of security we get in order to get a better one tomorrow. And on this topic of investigation or investigators, we've been hearing that on the one hand, this is a murky world where accountability lines are opaque and where some of those involved are not accountable in any meaningful way to laws and regulations. And on the other hand, we've heard about it being one of the world's hidden gems and unspoken about areas of activity. And so, perfect for thought leadership, we've invited 4 leading experts from around the world to debate these issues with us today. And in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite the 4 of them to introduce themselves. And as soon as they've done that, I'll ask each of them to make an opening statement, 3 minutes to get their views on this topic. And at the end of that, we'll invite you, the audience, to ask questions. Now, can you please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen? And can you please get your questions in as soon as you can? And we'll try and involve you. It's action-packed. For those who've been with us before, you know how it works. So without further ado, let's get going. And let's ask our panel to introduce themselves. And let's start out in South Africa with Johan.
Good day, folks. It's nice to at least be on this panel. And Martin, thank you for the invite. I've been around in the industry for quite some time, about nearly 40 years. Police experience, a lot of private sector experience, and have been involved with a whole lot of different types of investigations around the world. So I'm looking forward to the questions that we may get and to interfacing with the other participants.
Thank you very much indeed. And Gerald, could you introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gerald Moor. I'm the CEO of the Inkerman Group and all its subsidiaries. And I've been doing that in the commercial world for over 25 years now. Before that, I worked in the British government. And my company and myself, we cover a whole wide gamut of investigations, which also include things like extortion and when people are being kidnapped. And of course, now there's much more on the cyber ransom side. And just remember, it's people that steal.
Thank you very much indeed, Gerald. I'm sure we're going to come back to that. Dorival, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Martin. Greetings to you and the viewers. I'm a professor in the Department of Criminology and Security Science at the University of South Africa. I teach investigations to private and government officials. Prior to me joining the university, I was with the South African Police Service for approximately 30 years. My area of specialization was criminal investigation. I also served as one of the governors of the South African Institute of Security in South Africa.
Thank you very much indeed. And finally, back to Europe. Sebastian, your introduction, please.
Good afternoon, Martin. Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Poland. I'm a managing director of SASMA company. We are delivering to the client's intelligence and providing the corporate investigation service. With my over 20 years of experience, we are doing our best to swim in this murky water.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, brilliant. So as you can see, an international panel coming at this topic from different areas, all experts. So let's now hear each of their opening statements. And let's go first to South Africa. And Johan, your opening statement, please.
Right. The only reason I ever got into investigation is because I had spoken to someone at the pub who has read a book on investigations. So I then decided it sounded like a very interesting environment to become involved with. And during my years in the police, I had some experience in normal detective work and eventually landed up in the special branch, which dealt with counterterrorism and the tracing of the money. And in 9/11, I was in New York and I experienced the fiasco that took place there. I was based out of Dubai at that time, and it was interesting at that time to find that people didn't know where they were going. And one of the things that we found was that we needed to follow the money. And that brought about a whole new environment to investigate, because it didn't only take us to the terrorism environment, but it also took us into the murky waters of smuggling, specifically tobacco products, because I work quite intensively in that environment, and of wild animals, specifically lions and rhinos, and then a little bit of elephants. But there's so much happening in that environment, and you get all kinds of new specialists. Everyone who pops up is a forensic specialist. And I don't think people quite realize that the use of the word forensic, how it fits into the investigation environment. So, you know, we're looking forward to how do we take this product that we have and commercialize it to such a degree that it leaves a professional taste in the client's mouth, instead of something where you just get a fly-by-night who sets up an operation, who says he's got all these connections, and you know, when something goes wrong, they kind of muddy the waters for the rest of the folks that work in a more professional environment.
Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate that. Johan. Gerald, your opening statement, please.
Well, as intelligence investigations is the second oldest profession, with prostitution being the first, I wasn't really qualified to do the first one. And so my whole life has been around looking at things and making them better, using the intelligence requirement as the way forward. And I say that because you need to make sure when you sit down with your client, whoever it is, that they make sure that they tell you exactly what they want. Because so often, if they don't, you go and actually produce some good work, and then they say, well, that's not what we wanted. You've got to pick your team well. Your team you need to screen and vet, because as I said earlier on, it's people that steal. And you want to make sure that your own people are reliable and have a huge amount of integrity, even if they're coming from what I would say are good backgrounds. The other thing is, don't trust your client. I know that sounds strange, but your client will never tell you everything, because they're always going to try and hide something. And give them a health warning as well. We always give them a health warning to say, look, whatever it is that you've got, if you're not going to tell us, we will find it. It will crawl out from underneath that stone. And it's far better that we're all on side. And I think the other thing is the way the world is going at the moment with the Anti-Bribery Act, anti-slavery, and all those it's our business, and also other commercial businesses are becoming very much more governed. And therefore, these days, investigations, whether they like it or not, end up going down the legal route. And that legal route needs to give both the client and us the protection of being gone through a lawyer, because that way, you, as you all know, you're hidden from and protected from disclosure. There's a whole heap of other things which, you know, who do you trust and who don't you trust? If you're going to do an investigation, never trust the accountants, whichever ones they are, because they're not looking for fraud. You know, it's you that will actually uncover that, unpalatable though it might be. And always do things the legal way, because ultimately any investigation which we run is always done on the basis that there will be litigation at the end. Even if the client doesn't want it at the beginning, they become very emotional when they realize some of the ways that they've been stiffed by somebody one way down the other. And that's when they want to go down the legal route. And don't expect very much help from the police. It's not their fault, but they're under-resourced. And that's why, you know, clients come to us, and provided you can put a case together for whichever prosecution service, then that's important. And I think the other big thing is that now we're doing a lot of international work. That's us collectively. know the law in the country you're operating in. That's me.
Thank you very much indeed. Dorovel, your opening statement, please.
Oh, thank you, Martin. If we look at criminal investigations, it's questionable as to the nature and extent which it attracts a mystical appeal. That needs to be, looked at theoretically, to what extent. Criminal investigations, to me, is actually the mother of all investigations. It outlines the principles and sciences for all different types of investigation, be it commercial, private, workplace investigations, investigative journalism, which is very vibrant in South Africa at the moment. But I see proactive investigations as mystical compared to reactive investigations because of its surprise element. As far as globalization is concerned, it has a serious impact on investigations. Globalization has become a feature of social and cultural tradition worldwide. The world has become a global village owing to porous borders at the moment, better roads and means of transport, relaxed legislation in some places, and improved electronic technology. Physical and electronic movements has become much more simple and easier for criminals. So we are dealing with criminals moving away from one country to another. Investigation can be regarded as a murky world, murky in the sense that investigation can become very messy, when you are confronted with high levels of corruption within the organization. The perpetrators will do everything to obliterate the paper trail by concealing criminal gains. And these criminal gains are concealed by converting the gains into cryptocurrency, bitcoins, gold coins, hide money away in foreign bank accounts, put them in safe boxes, etc. On the other hand, one looks at globalization, it has also led to the world becoming murky with different forms of criminality, such as insider threats. There's about 80% of security breaches that take place with insider threats. If you look at corporate espionage, theft of corporate information, it seems to be increasing. And if you look at high-tech crime, it's one of the biggest threats of today. That is computer crime, cyber crimes, identity theft, electronic theft, money laundering, counterfeiting, smuggling, and other offenses are all on the increase. If you look at in-depth investigations of crimes like terrorism, I mean, one has to deal with bombings and assassinations, armed assaults, kidnappings, hostage situations, and aircraft hijackings, etc. I think what is very important is, organizations should look at having good policy standards. Internal audits needs to be practiced. Inspections and quality investigations by highly skilled, knowledgeable investigators are essential requirements to ensure good governance. And this has indeed improved the investigation capacity worldwide. And in my view, commercial and private investigations are thriving because of the demand for good governance. And if one goes deeper, you look at the dangers, some of the dangers that are posed by good governance is dangers, including legislation powers. What type of legislative mechanism do we have in place? The international conventions, extradition treaties, other protocols. The risk of becoming corrupt, infringement of human rights, maladministration, obtaining evidence unconstitutionally. And if you look at some of the barriers, to a more transparent investigatory environment, I mean, you cannot go out doing investigations without a proper mandate. Failing to investigate is a serious misconduct and it's, or dangerous activity. Conducting improper investigation by using inexperienced investigators. Compromising confidentiality. These are all some of the aspects that are really, questionable. So, with regards to looking at transparency, one has to be very careful as to how one approaches this. And today, the world is faced with, extradition problems, where if you need to extradite somebody, it's a long process. So private investigators are placed in a much more difficult situation than police officers. They do not have this infrastructure and resources to support them wholeheartedly without the necessary financial support. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. So let's have our final opening statement from Sebastian. Just to remind the audience, if you can use your question and answer button at the bottom of your screen to ask questions, we'll endeavour to get to you as soon as Sebastian's finished. Sebastian, your opening statement, please.
We have a saying in Polish, to fish in the murky water, which means doing dodgy business in unstable legal and political environment. Now let's translate it for security English. It means in every single murky water, you can find a diamond fish, but beware of the treats and traps. So I have to say one thing. I have a law enforcement experience plus corporate experience plus private security business experience. And in every part of my professional life, I have to swim in this murky water. Sometimes successful, sometimes without success. But one thing is for sure, if you will not jump to this murky water, you will not achieve a success, which means you will not find these diamonds. My colleagues mentioned about very important points, but I would like to share with you one more point, which is from my perspective, very important part of the investigator work. It's the thinking out of the box. Not far ago, we had a very complicated corporate investigation, which took us finally more than 2 years. It was plenty of law enforcement involved from many European countries plus Europol, but finally we've been successful. And our client told us, you've been successful because you were thinking out of the box. And of course we have to follow in the rules, but out of the box, it's one of the main key in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and very interesting. Okay, plenty of stuff to get on with there. There is an interesting book been published just late last year by Clarissa Meerits from the Netherlands, and she argues that amongst all the good work that's done, there's a reality that investigators operate under the radar, and that means that they're always subject to being considered to be part of a murky world because the regulation of them is lacking. Let me come to you first, Johan. Would you agree that the regulation of investigators is sadly lacking and that's leading to a murky interpretation?
Yes, I'm afraid that is part of the problem. And you know, there's a large number of people who are doing investigations who try and stick to a professional manner of dealing with with investigative barriers, because we get them. It doesn't matter what type of investigation you're going to get. And I agree with Sebastian, you land up in murky water, and we're trying to solve a problem which someone else has had a lot of time to perpetrate. And then the client, who we, as Gerald said, has to be your number one suspect, actually. You've got to deal with that first before you do anything substantial. I sit in South Africa, we have CIRA, which is the Professional Security Industry Regulatory Authority, and I sit on the Investigations Committee. Now, they know that they have to, everyone has to register who does investigations. Anyone who gives security advice has to register, but they have a problem because the investigators form part of big companies such as the PwC, Deloitte's type organizations, but they're not seen as investigators, but they are doing investigations. So there's a bit of murky water as far as that is concerned, and those are things that we have to address if you want to bring everyone under the same banner.
Okay, Dorothy, why is that so difficult? I mean, it's not a South Africa problem, it seems to be a worldwide problem, but what's the big difficulty about defining what the activity is in order to get it regulated?
It depends on the powers. If you look at the police and other statutory bodies, their powers are enormous compared to private security investigators, corporate investigators. You know, they have to follow a difficult terrain to get down to investigate a specific matter. But if you look at, you know, the police, they have, for example, the forensic science laboratory supporting them all the way. And if a private investigator has to get the service of forensic science laboratory, he or she has to consult with a private entity and pay them an X amount of money. Can companies afford this? I mean, it all boils down to cost-benefit analysis at the end of the day. Am I prepared to invest so much to get this investigation done? You know, what is the actual threat to me as an organization? Legislation is one of the impediments, you know, in terms of powers given to private investigators and corporate investigators. And investigative journalists as well have similar problems. They have to find their own means and ways of getting down there and getting the information. But surprisingly, investigative journalists in South Africa have got the best information sources. You know, the credit goes to them, really.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. So let me come to Gerald. Gerald, do you feel that it's an acceptable criticism to say the problem with the world of private corporate investigation, non-police investigation, is that it's got a reputation in some circles for being not as good as it should be, principally because it seemed to be a law unto itself? Gerald, would you agree with that?
No.
Why?
If you're a good investigations company, you've got people of all different walks of life which you need to have. You don't need to have people who've just been law enforcement. You know, it's useful, but they come with a particular way of doing things, and it's good for being able to take things to evidential standard and presenting them to court, because obviously if you've got a case, you're pushing it over. But you've got people who are cyber experts. Just about every investigation that anybody who's watching this will have some kind of part in, whether it's using an iPhone, whether it's a computer or whatever else it is. So you've got to have people who are knowledgeable, but also can keep it to evidential standards. Now, you know, swimming in murky water, yeah, but you know, there are devices to be able to see in murky water, and it's the ability to actually differentiate when you're looking at those things. And I feel that the whole point of an investigation is getting down to clearly a result at the end, whilst at the same time deflecting all the bits that are going to be happening on the side to deflect you. You know, whether it's the client, whether it's other people who've actually been perpetrating some of these frauds. And the one thing which we're very lucky about is that the client tends to give us the resource, and that's the resource that the police don't have. You know, obviously it depends on what the end result is going, you know, needs to be. But having inputs of anywhere between £1 and £5 million in doing an investigation, depending on what the size is, actually does cut through a huge number of aspects. We can be faster than the police in certain areas because we don't have to follow the same processes. We still have to follow the same laws. And that's why I said earlier on, making sure that you're doing it, following it in the countries that you're in, and into the interjurisdictional aspects are really something that which we all have to be cognizant of.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Sebastian. Sebastian, a question here from Peter Herwig. He makes the difference between police investigators and private investigators. Gerald there was pointing out some of the differences. They do seem to be two very different worlds. And one of the things that cropped up in these webinars in the past in terms of thought leadership, we need all those tackling the bad guys to work together. Could this happen in the world of private and corporate investigation working with the police, Sebastian?
Well, that's a really good question. And Actually, it's a really good question, but the answer is difficult. So I can tell you how it works in Europe mostly. This private-public partnership almost doesn't work. Even Europol is calling to increase this private-public partnerships between the corporate investigators and police investigators. But the truth is that everything based on your private relationships, which you will build during your work, which you build during your service in the law enforcement. So, of course, depends on the country, but from my experience, it looks that because we have a weakness of investigators, private investigators law, this cooperation with the police, it's not as good as we will accept.
But why?
Well, it's a little bit tricky. Sometimes the police doesn't trust us, which I can understand because we are talking about how professional is the private investigators. Sometimes the private investigators are the first people who are sharing the secrets with opposites. So it's a matter of trust, that's first. Second, police doesn't treat us professional. They are thinking that private, especially in Central Eastern Europe, that private is something worse than public. Like I said, everything based on your skills and how you will build your relation with the law enforcement. But I don't see in Europe any country which has a really good way of this cooperation. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I don't, probably not. Let me come to Johan. Johan, question for you here on this relationship with the police. I mean, this is a big deal coming out of these first 60 odd webinars. We need to harness all those who are fighting bad guards to work together. Investigation's shown up as an example of where that's almost non-existent, where they operate in completely different spheres. Would you agree they do? And where's the barrier that needs to be overcome to make that that problem go away? Johan first.
I think Sebastian hit the nail on the head there, because he had, you know, it's a matter of trust. And I don't know what it is among a lot of the private investigation people, is that they need to, you know, we have a secret, you know, and we've got to share the secret instead of just keeping it to themselves and solving the case. We've got a couple of, there's a TV show that's launching tomorrow here in South Africa, or on Thursday in South Africa. Again, a private investigator who's got himself onto the TV circuit. And, you know, if a person looks at it, you have to say that this is a thug. It's not a private investigator, but he's created a picture that the rest of us who are trying to do a professional job are quite, you know, we're disturbed in the way that he's being presented, because it kind of pulls the rest of us into it.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess, and really, you see, Gerald, that's my point, right? That unless you accept there's a much more rigorous form of regulation, the inevitability is the whole of the sort of sphere of activity is going to be seen in rather pejorative terms. Gerald.
Yeah, but in the UK, they've been looking at it for a long time, and they found it very difficult to do it, because where do you stop investigations? Because or to be qualified, if you're a lawyer and you've got your team playing, are they going to be regulated? Probably not. So it's just the private investigator. Yeah, there are some scallies around, but that's the same in any profession, and don't just look at our own. People build up and companies build up their reputations, and that's why clients and lawyers or whoever they are go to them. You know, there are those people who are doing the maritals and all the other bits and pieces at one end of the spectrum, and then you've got others that are doing the big corporate investigations with a whole heap of different types of people, as I said earlier on. And I think the point has just been made. It is all about, do you trust the people that you're working with, fellow investigators? And that is built up over years. We have people who do and help us who are not part of Inkerman, but we trust them and we've been with them for many years. You know, so I think from that point of view, how are you going to actually legislate for someone who's working in, let's say in France, who's then also going to operate in the Sahel?
But you see, this is where Dennis Shep has asked a question, and I'll come to Doroval in a second about this. Really looking at this point about, you know, globally, this gets in the way of enormous opportunity for law enforcement and for the public good and for corporate good. I mean, would you agree that it does? The fact that we haven't got to grips with this. Very, very briefly, Gerald, just finishing that point.
No, because what people have got to understand now is the world has shrunk, and therefore we are going to be doing much more internationally. You know, thieves are coming in from all, and that's what they are. They're thieves, not white collar crime people. They're all over the place. With the internet, you're going to have to use and think outside of the box, as was actually being said earlier on. Use the artificial intelligence that is now abounding in our business. That's the way forward.
Okay, yes, Doroval. Doroval, I mean, let me come to you as an expert in this area. You've studied these points, and this underpins the point, doesn't it, Doroval? That is the issue about complexity and about definitions. Is that the reason we haven't got to grips with this?
No, I don't see that to be an impediment. I mean, investigation is more logic, just an application of science. But to me, I think the utilization by statutory bodies of private investigators is much more greater in South Africa because of specific skills and knowledge. And they do use people from the private sector to do cybercrime investigations and so forth. The demand is very great, and most of the preliminary investigations are done at grassroots level by private and corporate investigators before they hand it over to the police. And there's high court cases on that in South Africa. And really, it's not the the definitions that cause a problem, but I think there has to be more flexibility in terms of legislation for private security and corporate investigators to operate more freely.
Okay, thank you. Let me come on to a question for Sebastian. Sebastian, Gordon Knight's got a question here, which is rather interesting. And talking about murky waters here, does ever in the corporate world, and it's already been said by some of you that it operates in a different way, it can be quicker and it doesn't have to follow the same processes, and that's one of its advantages. Is there a case that in the corporate, in the private world, the end justify the means? That, you know, you've got to satisfy the client, and that's a bigger deal than having to follow rules and regulations, perhaps, or stretching them, perhaps, and at least the scope to do it where no one can see. Sebastian, and then I'll come to Johan.
Well, answer should be yes, but the real world is no. Why? It's really tricky. This way of thinking, I mean, can ruin the client brand. The main role of the investigator is support a client business. You cannot ruin the client brand if you are swimming in this murky water and you are choosing the shortcuts. Sooner or later, you have to cooperate with judge, you have to cooperate with court, prosecutor, police. And if you will bring some evidence based on the murky waters results, you can destroy the client brands, and that's my way of thinking and my way of work.
Okay, Johan, your thoughts on Gordon Knight's question? It's a good one, isn't it? Because that's one of the issues about the private world generally, I think. Johan.
Yeah, and I agree with Sebastian there. Sometimes there's no other option but to go and delve around in the murky water to find something. But the trick in this whole thing is to be able to take what you found in the murky water and turn it into something that you can use as evidence. And that then brings us to Peter Herwig's other question, which is asking about the forensics, because he says suitable to courts for judicature. And part of our problem is that the investigators are not always properly taught how to take statements or write a statement which will be acceptable in court. And so they miss a whole lot of points. And by the time it gets to court, it's not acceptable as something that you can use to prosecute a perpetrator.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I agree the point, I suppose. Bonaya Emmanuel, I'm sorry if I haven't got that name pronounced. Gerald, I mean, raises the point that fees charged. Now, of course, in the world of private investigation, this is extreme. I mean, no harm in that. There's the elites that charge a lot and to a very, very different clientele. I suppose the point is, how does a client know it's getting value for money if there isn't a regime or a structure in place that provides a framework for understanding that?
Well, that's the fault of the investigations at the beginning, because before you start anything, you should actually lay it down in front of the client exactly what it is it's going to, that they want to achieve. And very rarely will you be able to say at the start of investigation, it's going to cost X and take Y, because you have no idea what you're going to find. And so the way that you can actually control that is you do every investigation within a phase. And you say, for phase one, we're going to do X. Because at the end of phase one, you might find nothing and not be able to go any further, and the client has saved money. On the other hand, the tasks which have been set for phase one might then allow for different avenues of investigation to follow, and you then do those accordingly.
Okay, let me do a question here from Brian Sims, which has a broader application. And I suppose it's this. It goes, and I'll come to Doroval if I might. Is there out there an appetite for more closely regulating this world? Doroval.
Yes, there is. There is definitely an appetite. But I think investigators need to start exploring more investigative methodologies rather than following linear methods of investigation. That's very, very vital, because in today's world, people know, simply this is a way the police are going to investigate, or the corporate investigate, or the private investigator. So it's a very creative aspect that is required. More innovation is needed by an investigator to think more widely out of the box and to start looking at more investigative methodologies. And this is where the sciences come in. This is where investigators need to use the sciences more to their benefit than following just a normal formal process of linear investigations.
Okay. Let's take this a stage further. What is the key thing that needs to change in order for the essential, and I'll come to you, Gerald, first, and then Sebastian. We've heard a lot in previous webinars about some of the great things that have been done in the world of corporate investigation. I mean, carrying out difficult investigations in trying times, recovering large sums of money for organisations that otherwise wouldn't have been able to do, identifying a whole range of criminal activity. Gerald, what's the thing that needs to change for us all to be talking about the good and how we can harness it, rather than being suspicious about what's going on? Gerald.
Oh, how long have you got?
About 30 seconds, sorry, but...
I think it's very difficult, is the answer, and I think it's, at this particular juncture, it's not achievable.
Is there, okay, because, why not?
Because of the complexities of what everybody's doing and the different jurisdictions that you're working with. You have different people who've got different ideas as to how it should be run.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, Sebastian, would you agree with this? I mean, it's one of these big things, isn't it, about thinking about how we can harness the good, because working for corporations is still a public benefit. If you're taking out bad players all the time, or you're recovering goods, that's good for the public. And it's about how in this world of investigation we can put across the good that's done and not at the expense of it, which doesn't come through loud and clear to the world, I don't think. Do you agree, Sebastian?
Yeah, I fully agree with Gerald, and to be honest, I'm not sure if I can add something to this, because this corporate investigation world is really difficult, different legal regulation, different mentality, different countries. I fully agree with Gerald.
Okay, so Johan, let's be clear. Let me give a thought on this. This is about taking a very determined line on what different types of activities there are, and then making sure everyone has to be registered, enforcing it an activity type basis, and being determined. It's a matter of being clear, determined, and forcing the issue on the agenda. And that's the political will that's lacking, Johan.
I agree, and the problem is the political will is the issue. And if you've got friends in high places, especially in our type of environment, you can bypass the system. And we need to get past that, because we're never going to be seen as professionals, as a sector in investigations if we don't have some form of control, which encompasses everyone, and it's not just applicable to certain elements within the community.
Okay, gentlemen, I have to say, a fascinating conversation, and we're going to come back to this. I'm just going to ask you one final comment each. You only got 10 seconds each, so I'm going to be precise here. What one change would you each like to see in this world of corporate-private investigation in order to take it to the next stage? So I appreciate the ultimate aim is tricky. What would you like to see done next? Dorival.
Well, at the moment in South Africa, there's a big demand for private investigators. The reason being, private investigators are doing a much different type of investigation. And people go out to get private investigators to support them in the investigation of their cases, private cases. I think it's more because of their creativity and the more investigative methodologies they are applying, which is quite different from, as I said earlier, from linear type of investigations. So the demand is there for private investigations, provided that there is good governance, and we all are working towards good governance, and private investigators are in that particular fold.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Sebastian, your thoughts? What would you like to see change?
Well, like I mentioned in the past, private-public partnership. I would like to see that we and police and other law enforcement, we are treated together as a friends, and we trust ourselves, and we have to believe that we have one enemy, but we are not the enemy. We are the friends. We work together, and this is what I would like to see.
Yeah, and that's a long-term process, but a very important one. Yeah. Okay, Johan.
Right. The situation is that I would like to see how we can develop more professional environments and help the people the people in our industry to be able to develop proper functional statements that they can take to court, and develop a better understanding on intelligence-led investigations, because that is a key point of an investigation.
Very good. Thank you very much. And finally, Gerald, your final comment, please, on this issue.
I absolutely agree with Sebastian. I think, the way forward has got to be the private aspect coming together with law enforcement. We have the resources sometimes, but the police have different resources. And if we're all pulling on the same rope in the same direction, that can actually provide a speedier resolution. Because at the moment, it's very much them and us, and we want it to be us as a totality.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Those final comments were inspired by questions from Samson and Kevin Williams. Sorry we couldn't get all the questions in, everybody. Panel, thank you very much indeed. That was absolutely outstanding. And we're definitely going to come back to this topic. There's so much potential that we could harness if we can get the thinking right on this issue. So thank you very much indeed to that. And just to let you know, when we're talking about good practice and good performance, that OSPA nominations are still open in Romania and Germany, and they've just opened in South Africa. In fact, Dorovel and Johan are both judges on the South African OSPA, so do get your entries in South Africa. And to let you know, 2 award ceremonies coming up. The Outstanding Security Performance Awards in the Benelux. There's a thought leadership in the afternoon as well. An award ceremony afterwards. It's virtual and it's free. What reason have you got not to attend that? There's the link, and you can get there from the OSPA's website. And the Tackling Economic Crime Awards, we can announce that for all those involved in tackling economic crime, and investigators feature prominently there too, the award ceremony is on the 9th of December, and we'll be announcing more about that in due course. So look out for that on the 9th of December, also a virtual award. Finally, just to say that we'll be going through all again on Thursday, another thought leadership webinar, this time on a different topic, keeping business going. How central marginal is security to core business activity? We'll be looking at that issue on Thursday at 3:30 British Summer Time. So do please join us then. My thanks once again to the panel. My thanks to the audience for your questions. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to everybody. And my thanks also to Christine Brooks and Hannah Miller in the background who push all the buttons and do so much important work. So hope to see you on Thursday, or if not at one of our future webinars, and wherever you are in the world. Until then, stay safe.